Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling, well, a really big challenge for agriculture drought.
Yeah, it's huge.
But specifically, we've got this stack of material here, and we're doing a deep dive into one particular solution, fruit tree-based agroforestry, and looking at how these systems seem to build, remarkable resilience against water scarcity.
That's the plan. You gave us the source material, and our job now is to really dig through it, pull out the key insights for you.
Wow.
You want you to understand how these systems are actually structured, why they seem to work so well when water's tight, and, the specific ecological stuff going on.
The mechanisms?
Exactly. The mechanisms, roots, microclimates, the whole deal that make them so effective.
So we'll look at the basic structure, check out some really interesting examples from different places.
Around the world, yeah.
And then really get into the nuts and bolts,
Yeah.
the science bit, how they actually manage and save water. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay, let's dive in then. Maybe start with the basics. Defining agroforestry.
Good idea.
At its heart, it's pretty simple conceptually.
Yeah.
You're intentionally integrating trees or shrubs with crops or livestock.
Okay.
Sometimes both.
All on the same piece of land,
Yeah.
not separating everything out.
Right, mixing it up. And when we talk fruit tree systems specifically,
Yeah.
you're combining the economic side, getting valuable fruit to sell or use, with all those ecological pluses that trees bring.
So trying to get the best of both worlds.
Kind of. And what's really interesting, I think, from the material is how these systems are often designed to, mimic natural ecosystems.
How so?
Think about maybe the edge of a forest or a savanna. You've got different layers, different types of plants, all interacting. It's that complexity that sees to be key for resilience.
Makes sense. So it's not just one single model then.
Oh, definitely not. The sources mention different forms. There's silverable, that's trees mixed in with annual crops like wheat or corn.
Okay.
Then silvopasture trees with animals grazing underneath. And those, really complex, multi-layered setups people call food forests. Lots of diversity there.
So different approaches for different situations.
Exactly. And the material we looked at had some really compelling examples from all over showing how well these work, especially where water's a major headache.
Like where, for example?
Well, take Sub-Saharan Africa. The sources talked about farmers integrating native fruit trees, things like baobab, tamarind, mango.
Okay, familiar ones.
Yeah. And the point was, these trees provide food, nutrition, and income, crucially, during droughts when the usual annual crops might just completely fail. They're like a safety net.
Oh, lifeline, really.
Pretty much. And you see similar stories from, say, India's semi-arid regions. They have traditional systems, often based around mango and coconut trees, that are just really effective at managing drought. And it's not just the trees themselves, but the whole system, the diversity of species they use, the water harvesting techniques built right in.
So it's the combination, and it's not only about just scraping by, is it? The material mentioned productivity, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at Northwest Vietnam. They had examples of systems combining long-in trees or sun-trad trees with maize and forage grass.
Okay.
And these mixed systems generated significantly higher average annual incomes compared to just growing the crops alone.
Wow, okay. So better income and more resilience.
That's the idea. And Cuba's an interesting case, too. The material noted that since the early 90s, agroforestry, especially with fruit trees, really took off there.
Why them?
Well, it was part of a big shift towards more sustainable, self-sufficient agriculture. It was strategic, really, for their food security.
Right, makes sense. And you mentioned harsh conditions. What about really dry places?
Yeah, the Brazilian Caatinga example was striking. It's semi-arid, gets maybe only 400, 600 millimeters of rain a year. That's not a lot.
Yeah, fine not.
But by using native fruit species, ones that are naturally adapted to those conditions, these agroforestry systems keep producing right through drought cycles that would just shut down conventional farming there.
That's incredible.
It really is. So, the big picture from all these examples, combining the right fruit trees, ones adapted to the local conditions with smart management, it works. It provides income, food, and keeps farms productive even when water is scarce.
Okay, so that establishes what these systems exist and work globally, and the where from Africa to Asia to South America. Now let's get into the how.
The mechanisms.
Yeah, the core stuff. How do they actually achieve this drought resilience. The material suggests it's not just one single thing.
No, it's definitely a combination, a mix of ecological processes, structural features. They all work together to improve how much water is available, how efficiently it's used, and sort of buffer the whole system against dry periods.
Okay, let's break that down. Mechanism number one seems to be the trees themselves, right? Their own physiology.
Exactly, the built-in advantages of the fruit trees.
And the big one there is roots, deep roots.
Yep, that comes up again and again in the sources. These fruit trees often have roots going down, 2 to 5 meters, sometimes even deeper, which means they can access groundwater that shallow-rooted crops, like your typical annuals, just can't get to.
They're tapping a different reservoir.
Precisely. And some trees have, extra adaptations. Pomegranate and fig trees, for instance, they're mentioned as being exceptionally tolerant to drought.
How do they manage that?
Well, partly it's physical things like smaller leaves or waxy coatings, cuticles that cut down water loss, but also internal chemistry, something called osmotic adjustment.
Osmotic adjustment.
Yeah, basically changing the concentration of stuff, solutes, inside their cells. It helps them pull in water even when the soil around them is pretty dry. It's quite clever.
That is clever. And the material mentions citrus too, but more about the rootstock.
Right. With citrus, the choice of rootstock, that's the root system the fruiting part is grafted onto, is crucial. There was a study mentioned showing citrus on drought-tolerant rootstocks kept producing good quality fruit even when irrigation was cut by 50%. Half the water.
So the foundation matters. A lot.
Yeah. Hugely. And stone fruits, too, almonds, pistachios, they're highlighted as being remarkably adapted. Again, deep roots, very efficient water use.
Okay, so deep roots and special adaptations are part one. What's the next big mechanism contributing to water resilience?
Well, a huge factor is how the trees actually change the way water behaves in the soil, how they help conserve it right there.
Okay, how does that work, physically?
It starts right up top with the canopy. The leaves and branches intercept rain. The material suggested around 10, maybe 20%.
So not all the rain hits the ground directly underneath.
Right. It changes the pattern. Some drips through, that's throughfall. Some runs down the trunk stem flow. This can actually concentrate water near the base of the tree.
Interesting. And I guess the shade from the canopy helps too, like a mulch.
Exactly like a mulch. That shade drastically reduces how much water just evaporates straight off the soil surface. The figures mentioned were 30 to 60% reduction compared to open ground.
30 to 60%. That's a massive saving.
It's huge. That's water staying in the soil, available for plants, instead of just vanishing into the air.
Okay, so less water leaving from the top. What about getting water into the soil better in the first place? Does that happen?
Yes, and the roots are involved there too. As tree roots grow, die back, decompose, they create channels, little tunnels in the soil.
Macropores.
That's the term, macropores.
Yeah.
And these act like little highways for rainwater to soak in quickly. Infiltration rates, that's the measure, can be 2 or even 3 times higher in these systems compared to compacted conventional fields.
So when it does rain, more of it actually gets into the soil bank instead of just running off the surface.
Precisely. And then you've got the different rooting depths. The deep tree roots, the shallower crop roots. Together, they're exploring a much larger volume of the soil, different layers, accessing more of the total water that's stored there.
Okay, you mentioned those deep roots getting down to groundwater earlier. Can that deeper water help the plants nearer the surface?
Yes. This is where it gets really cool. There's a process the material highlights called hydraulic lift.
Hydraulic lift. Sounds like something from engineering.
A bit. But it's biology. During dry times, those deep tree roots can pull water up from wetter zones deep down.
Okay.
And actually release some of it out through their shallower roots into the drier topsoil layers.
Wait, really? They move water up for other plants?
It sounds odd, but yeah, it's been documented. And that water, lifted up, can then be used by the shallower rooted crops growing nearby. The tree is essentially sharing the deep water.
So they're not just competing, they can actually be helping their neighbors out with water sometimes?
Exactly. It's a facilitator role. And one more soil thing, organic matter, can't forget that.
From the trees dropping leaves and stuff.
Yeah, loose litter, twigs, roots turning over. It all adds organic matter to the soil. And the sources say this improves the soil's water holding capacity, like its sponginess, by maybe 15 to 25%.
So the soil can hold on to more water for longer between rains.
Which is a crucial buffer during those dry spells.
Okay, got it. So tree adaptations, check. Soil water dynamics, check. What's the third big piece?
Microclimate modification. The trees literally change the climate right underneath them.
Creating their own little weather zone.
Sort of. The canopy provides shade, obviously, but it also cuts down wind. And the data shows this makes a real difference. We're talking temperature reductions of 3 to 8 degrees Celsius under the trees compared to out in the open.
That is quite a bit cooler.
And humidity goes up too, maybe 10 to 20% higher under the canopy.
Which must be less stressful for the plants growing there.
Hugely less stressful, especially when it's hot and dry.
Right.
Those cooler, more humid conditions lower what's called the vapor pressure deficit. Think of it as the air being less thirsty.
Okay.
And because the air is less thirsty, the plants growing underneath don't lose as much water through their leaves, transpiration goes down. The material suggests by 20 to 40%.
Wow. Another big saving.
Yeah. And add in the windbreak effect you mentioned.
Right. Stopping the wind, drying things out.
Exactly. It cuts down that advective drying and also just the physical stress of wind battering the crops. Some studies in semi-arid areas showed overall water loss from the whole system evaporation plus transpiration or evapotranspiration was 15 to 30% lower in these sheltered agroforestry plots compared to open fields.
Okay, wow. So let me see if I've got this. It's like a whole package deal.
Mm-hmm.
The trees themselves are tough and have deep roots. They improve the soil so it captures and holds more water, and they even share deep water sometimes. And they create this sheltered, cooler, more humid microclimate that reduces water loss from everything.
You've got it. It's this sophisticated interplay between all these factors. The trees aren't passive. They're actively shaping their environment to conserve and manage water. It's a multi-layered resilience strategy built right in.
It really demonstrates the power of these integrated systems, doesn't it? Combining tree physiology, soil health, microclimate control.
Yeah.
It all adds up to create this robust drought resilience that, as the material shows, often leaves conventional systems struggling.
Absolutely. It's leveraging natural processes, mimicking how ecosystems sustain themselves.
So now you've really got a shortcut, a framework for understanding how fruit tree agroforestry tackles this huge challenge of water scarcity, thanks to this deep dive into the material we had. It's clear these systems offer a powerful, nature-based approach.
It really makes you think, though, if these systems are so good at mimicking nature to handle drought, what other big farming challenges could we tackle by looking more closely at how nature already does things? You know, pests, soil health, maybe even climate volatility. Something to chew on.